The 850 million rands hit on government employee. Bobita Deokaran was more than just a government worker. She was a mother, a friend, and a woman who believed in doing what was right. As a senior manager at the South Africa Department of Health in South Africa, Bobita had earned a reputation for honesty and professionalism. But what few people knew was that behind the calm smile, she was carrying the heavy burden of knowing too much. She had seen things, strange transactions, suspicious payments, and money disappearing from hospital accounts without explanation. Instead of looking away, she decided to speak up. She became a whistleblower, a rare kind of hero willing to risk everything for the truth. Bobita provided critical information to law enforcement agencies like the Special Investigating Unit, SIU, and the Hawks. Her focus was on irregular payments and procurement at Tembisa Hospital, a case involving nearly 850 million rands. She carefully documented everything she found, sending a clear message to corrupt officials. She would not be silent. But that bravery came at a cost. On the morning of August 23, 2021, Bobita had just dropped off her daughter at school. As she sat in her car outside her home in Johannesburg, she was suddenly ambushed. Multiple gunshots rang out in the quiet suburb, and Bobita was fatally wounded. The community was stunned, and the news sent shockwaves across the nation. For many, it was a clear sign that corruption in South Africa wasn't just about stolen money. It was deadly. Her murder felt like a message to anyone else thinking of exposing the truth. The news of Bobita Deokaran's murder spread like wildfire across South Africa. Many couldn't believe that a woman known for doing her job with honesty could be killed in such a brutal way. Social media exploded with messages of grief, anger, and fear. People asked, who would want her dead? Why now, just as investigations into hospital corruption were gaining traction? Her killing didn't feel random, it felt calculated. Authorities quickly realized this was not just a tragic shooting, but a carefully planned assassination. The timing, location, and method pointed to professionals. This was someone sending a message: stop looking too closely. The South African Police Service launched an urgent investigation, and the Hawks were brought in to help track down her killers. CCTV footage from her neighborhood showed a suspicious car tailing Bobita for days before the murder. Investigators used cell phone records, vehicle tracking, and surveillance video to piece together what happened. Within weeks, 6 suspects were arrested and charged with her murder. But something didn't feel right. These men were believed to be the shooters, but they weren't the ones who had the most to lose from Bobita's truth-telling. People began to whisper, if these were just hitmen who gave the order. The arrest of the 6 suspects offered some hope, but it didn't answer the most important question. Who paid them? During police interrogations, it became clear the suspects were not politically powerful, nor were they linked to any hospital or government contracts. They were alleged hired guns, brought in to silence Bobita. Investigators dug deeper and found that the suspects had been paid in cash, and one of them confessed to receiving 400,000 rands for the job. But no names were mentioned, no middleman, no boss, no mastermind. It was as if someone with a lot to lose had hired them to pull the trigger while keeping themselves far in the shadows. The public grew frustrated, and activists called for a deeper probe into the people Bobita had reported. Among the names she had flagged in her investigation were companies and individuals linked to suspicious multi-million rand contracts at Tembisa Hospital. Documents showed inflated prices for everyday medical supplies, 20 million rands for gloves, 15 million rands for thermometers, and more. The corruption she exposed was massive, and her murder now looked like part of a larger cover-up. Whistleblower protection in South Africa was suddenly under scrutiny. People feared speaking up, knowing what had happened to Bobita. Her colleagues at the Department of Health were shaken, many of them going silent out of fear. Yet, some voices remained brave, calling for justice, not just for Bobita, but for all whistleblowers. The trial of the 6 accused men began under intense public and media scrutiny. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense, as the faces of Bobita's killers were revealed. The suspects showed little emotion, even as evidence mounted against them. Prosecutors laid out the case in chilling detail: phone records, CCTV footage, and confessions that painted a picture of a planned, paid assassination. One of the men admitted they had followed Bobita's movements for days before the attack. He revealed they had been given her home address, her schedule, and even her car's description. That kind of detail suggested help from someone with insider knowledge, someone in a position of power. The prosecution focused on proving that the accused had committed the murder, but the bigger mystery remained untouched. Who gave them the information? Who paid the 400,000 rands for her death? As days turned into weeks, public frustration grew. Bobita's family sat quietly in the courtroom, seeking justice but also answers. The judge eventually sentenced all 6 men to long prison terms, the harshest allowed under South African law. But even with convictions secured, there was no celebration. Justice, it seemed, had only touched the surface. The people wanted the masterminds, not just the men who pulled the trigger. After the trial ended, the streets quieted, but the wound left by Bobata's death remained wide open. Her killing had exposed how dangerous it was to speak the truth in South Africa. Journalists, civil society groups, and politicians began calling for stronger whistleblower protection laws. Many feared that Bobata would not be the last, unless the system changed. Investigative reporters continued her work, uncovering more questionable payments at Tembisa Hospital and beyond. It was now clear that Bobata had stumbled onto a massive network of corruption, reaching far beyond a single hospital. Government officials promised change, but very little actually happened. Her name became a symbol, not just of bravery, but of the cost of integrity. A memorial was held outside her office, with candles, posters, and people standing silently in tribute. Her daughter, still a teenager, held back tears as she placed a white rose in front of a framed photo of her mother. She had lost not only her parent, but her sense of safety. Across the country, others whispered stories of corruption they had seen but were too afraid to report. Bobata had spoken up and been killed for it. The question lingered like smoke in the air. Would the country let her death be in vain? Or would her silence ignite a wave of truth that could no longer be stopped? After the 6 men were sentenced, investigators turned their attention to uncovering the people behind the murder. The public demanded answers, asking who had paid for Bobata's life to be taken. The Hawks followed every clue, but the deeper they went, the more difficult the trail became. Payments had been made in cash, burner phones were used, and no digital traces led to a mastermind. Several suspects refused to talk, and those who did only gave vague answers, claiming they didn't know who hired them. Even as investigators believed the hit was ordered by someone linked to the Tembisa Hospital corruption, no names could be confirmed. Whistleblower organizations raised concerns that the investigation was being deliberately slowed down or blocked. Some feared political protection was shielding powerful individuals. Bobata's colleague said she had received threats before her death, but these warnings were never officially recorded. The pressure on law enforcement grew, especially after new financial irregularities were discovered in other parts of the health department. Evidence pointed to a network of corruption worth hundreds of millions of rands, all potentially tied to the same figures Bobata had exposed. Still, no one at the top was arrested. It felt like justice had hit a wall, and the mastermind had disappeared into the fog. Meanwhile, Bobata's name faded from daily headlines, but her story remained etched in public memory. Her murder had become a cold reminder that in South Africa, telling the truth could cost you your life. As the case stalled, political leaders faced tough questions they struggled to answer. Members of parliament demanded updates from the Minister of Police, asking why the masterminds were still unknown. The public grew angry, feeling that someone powerful was being protected. Activists accused the government of turning a blind eye to corruption when it involved politically connected individuals. Some politicians gave speeches honoring Bobata's bravery, but their words rang hollow without action. Whistleblower advocates begged for reform, calling for safe reporting channels, anonymous tip lines, and emergency protection programs. One investigative report revealed that Bobata had warned her superiors multiple times about the suspicious contracts, but they had done nothing. Even worse, some of the same officials she had flagged remained in their positions, untouched and unbothered. In response, there were protests outside government buildings, with people holding signs that read, "Justice for Bobata" and "Protect the Truth-Tellers." The South Africa Department of Health promised an internal audit, but the results were never made public. South Africans began to lose trust in the system. Many wondered how deep the corruption went and how many others had been silenced in quieter ways. A few brave health workers spoke anonymously to the media, confirming that the threats were real and constant. They were afraid to follow in Bobata's footsteps. In the end, it became clear that her murder wasn't just about one hospital. It was about a system willing to protect money over truth. And as long as that system remained untouched, Bobata's fight for justice was far from over. In the months after Bobata Deokaran's murder, fear settled deep inside the hearts of other potential whistleblowers. Her story became a warning. If they could kill her, they could kill anyone. Government workers who had once considered reporting fraud or irregular contracts now chose to keep quiet. The cost of speaking out had become too high. Even anonymous tip lines saw a drop in activity, as many suspected they weren't as secure as promised. Journalists who tried to follow Bobata's trail found doors closing, sources vanishing, and people refusing to speak. A chilling silence spread across the South Africa Department of Health, as if everyone was waiting for the next target. In schools and churches, people spoke her name with sadness and admiration, calling her a hero who paid the ultimate price. But admiration was not enough to stop the fear. The institutions meant to protect whistleblowers, from the police to internal audit units, were now viewed with suspicion. Some civic organizations held public events to honor her memory, using them to teach others about the dangers of corruption. But even in those spaces, the atmosphere was tense. One activist confessed that they often wondered if they were being watched. The murder had not only silenced a voice, it had sent a message to all others. "Stay out of it," the silence said. And many listened, retreating into quiet survival, just as Bubita had feared before she died.